Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2024 release Red Rooms, and actually it's a 2023 release in its home country of Canada. This film is from Montreal, and it's a French-Canadian film, and it actually is in French, but that was in 2023 when it came out there. Just hit the United States. I got it through Fandango at Home rental. It finally showed up. I've been looking for this film, a way to watch this film, since like January of this year, basically, and it finally is on Fandango at Home. I rented it for $6.35. Very affordable. So, written and directed by Pascal Plante, who did La Generation Porn, Fake Tattoos, and Nadia Butterfly, just to name a few. Synopsis of this film. A lot of people will say this isn't necessarily horror. It's more of like a horror adjacent type film. I would say that's probably a little more accurate, but since there is a decent amount of horror aspect to it, I am covering it here, and I'm considering it actually at this point as one of the best releases this year for me. Currently in my top 10 when I'm doing this review. It's quite good. But basically the synopsis is it's about, in Montreal, there's a trial going on for this man that has been deemed the Demon of Rosemont, who did some very heinous things. And I'm not going to tell you what they were because YouTube, they wouldn't like me talking about that stuff specifically, and B, it's better if you actually watch the film and experience the courtroom as they talk about what was being done. It's all a part of the experience of the actual film itself. So, excuse me. So basically, it's about a main character, this woman, who starts going to the trial because she's interested. She's into true crime stuff. She's taken a big interest in this particular case. And then it's basically about how she starts becoming more interested in it, more obsessed in it, and what that kind of ends up doing to her life. And then also following what's going on with the trial itself. And then it's all about, where is this thing going? Where did these things intersect, and where does that end up taking her life? With her obsession, how far does her obsession go? That type of stuff. But like I said, this is a good film. It's one of the top ones that I've seen this year. I do highly recommend it. Things do start very slow and calm with the film, and it has a very subtle feel to it. The camera work actually helps a lot with this, especially within the courtroom, where it kind of is just like very slow panning motions up and down, left and right, just kind of. It's not flashy. This isn't like a high octane film. It feels just very like subtle and low key and low energy for the overwhelming majority of the film, although it does really ramp that stuff up at the end of the film, which I think makes it extremely effective that it does that, because it helps with the impact at the end of the film, because for the entirety of the film up until that point, you're just kind of like, oh, we're like going at a very leisurely pace. This is very calm. This is very even keel. And even though there's really terrible things that are being talked about, it's this interesting contrast of like hearing these awful, disturbing things, but then also just feeling like you're still relaxed, which is a very odd thing, but a very cool thing, an interesting dichotomy that the filmmaker was able to make happen with this. It starts like a video version of a true crime podcast that gives you testimony right from the courtroom. Very early on in the film, it does kind of get away from this as it goes further in, but early on, there's a lot of stuff in the courtroom. They're not showing you anything salacious, but they are talking about the salacious stuff. And even though they're just talking about it, but not showing certain things like evidence and videos and photos and stuff like that of the crimes, they are talking about things in detail, and that stuff is still pretty disturbing. So it's effective in that sense, but it does make you think about, okay, the whole true crime phenomena that is going on with how podcasts end up playing out and how people are so interested in them. It's a huge industry at this point in time, and this film kind of starts to go down this path of asking the question, like, how involved is too involved, and kind of posing a little bit of a question too of like, what is our obsession? Like, what is our interest in this? Like, what are we getting out of this? And there is something subtextually that I think it really is trying to say about society, but I'll say that at the very end, and I'll give people a warning before I do that if you don't want to know that, because that is spoilery for the subtext and theme aspect of the film. The main character is kind of hard to identify with, unfortunately, because she seems very devoid of personality. I think this was a intentional choice. I didn't really like the choice, though. I really do feel like it would have been more impactful if you made this character way more charismatic and way easier for audience members to actually identify with. As she is now, you really cannot identify with her. Now, the story's still interesting, and seeing what she's doing in her life and what she goes through is still interesting, but you don't feel close. You feel like very at a distance. And I think it would have been better if that was not the case. A lot of what takes place is slow and uneventful, but it ends up being about what's coming next and how it will add to the overall story. Really getting to the point that it feels intense without necessarily being intense at times, because you know this is going somewhere. You feel that it's kind of spiraling downward because of its kind of horror adjacent material, but you don't know where that is. So even though there might not be things going on for a long stretch, like, you feel like at any moment things could start to turn. Something major could pop up. You could start to see a little bit of the main structure of where the story is going to end up at the very end. So it does keep you engaged in that sense. They jump between mundane everyday life and things related to the actual case, which gives the idea that people are looking for excitement in true crime, which I thought was kind of an interesting thing that popped into my head while I was watching it. But it is, again, this interesting dichotomy of, you're kind of seeing the main character just go through some very just like ho-hum mundane things in her life, but then she's also like looking into things about the case and going to the courtroom and hearing about all this messed up stuff. And like, it just kind of shows that it's like, that's her excitement versus this is her just like ho-hum life that she's living, which, there are people who live lives like that. There isn't much of a score with this film, which is totally fine by me. I actually love that type of thing. I love when it's like minimalistic in the use of scores in films, because there are a lot of moments where the film is pretty silent. They just drop the score out completely, and then you can focus a lot more on sound design. You can focus a lot more on just like feeling awkward and off and weird, which is perfect for a film that is like this story-wise. The thought does cross your mind of why people would choose to subject themselves to getting so involved in something so awful. Now, me personally, I can say that I actually do listen to some true crime podcasts. I don't listen to the ones that kind of like are like over the top with just trying to be salacious to be salacious. I listen to the ones that are a lot more responsible, in the sense of really putting a big focus on, the victims and family members and the importance of those people, and not like hyping up, well, here's things about these killers and like this is so cool and interesting. Like, I remember having a conversation actually with someone years ago at this point who was like, oh, I'm into true crime, and I was like, oh, I listen to some true crime podcasts, and she was like, immediately says to me, who's your favorite serial killer? And I was just like, that hit me wrong immediately, and I'm just like, no. And I said to her, I'm just like, I don't believe in having a feeling like that or having thoughts like that. I think that's messed up. I think it's disgusting, because these are terrible crimes. They impact a lot of people, and it's focus on the victims and the families, and we're not focused on these killers being like interesting, cool people. Like, to say something like, who's your favorite serial killer, it's disgusting in my opinion. Like, I just cannot get with feeling like that, because it's putting focus in the wrong place. Yes, to a degree, people listen to these podcasts and watch the shows and stuff to hear about someone who's very abnormal when it comes to society. Why would someone do that? It just makes you wonder, like, what is going on. Just very fringe. But for someone like me, it's partially about, or actually a big part about, kind of confronting my own mortality and starting to make myself even more comfortable with death, because that's something I'm very afraid of. But side tangent, sorry about that. Going back to my notes, about an hour and 15 minutes in is when it really does take that next step up, and they create some really good tension from then on. I was saying how it was very kind of like even keel and calm before that point. When it hits about the hour and 15-minute mark and after that, it really starts to be a lot more, I'm not going to say chaotic, but like tense and a little faster in the way that it feels, not like as slow and plodding. People do say and have said that the ending of this film is shocking. I don't personally think it is shocking at all, but I do think it's a good ending. I think it's quite a good ending, especially for the story that's trying to be told, or the story I believe is trying to be told with this film. So I'm going to go ahead right now and give you my star rating, and then after that, I will tell you the subtext thing that's a little spoilery. So out of 5 stars, half stars, and play, I'm going to give this a very good 4-star rating. I think this is quite a good film. Would love to hear other people's opinions. Go ahead and put it in comments. We can talk spoilers in the comments. That's totally fine. Also, do me a favor, hit subscribe to my channel. Hit the thumbs up on the video to help me with the algorithm. Hit the notification bell button if you want to know when I'm putting up new videos. And also, I do have some memberships that I just rolled out that you can find the link in the description if that's something you're interested in. Okay, so log off if you don't want to know the thematics / subtext stuff right now. So getting into it. This film makes a point of how an online society that also drives people to isolate themselves ends up also driving extreme behavior and deviance through a purpose of feeling like you matter in some way. Hence the whole portion in this film of being like, here's this woman's mundane life, and then here's her getting way more involved with this case than any person probably should. And that's her excitement. That's what's making her feel like she has purpose, because her actual life that she's living doesn't make her feel like she has any sort of purpose. She feels like she needs excitement. She needs something else to make her feel like she matters to some degree. So that's why I come to that. And I think that's really what this film is trying to say. And I think it does it in a very interesting and effective way, really. So those are my thoughts. Again, comments if you want to. But regardless, thanks for taking your time to watch this. And until next time, keep it brutal.